Just a quick one before we start this video. First off, our master camera didn't roll the first time we started the conversation with Ton, and then the second time we tried to repeat the intro, but the camera overheated, so we missed the intro 2 times. I was doing this interview from a perspective of a deeply inspired person. The reason for that is really trivial. If you would think about it, like really think about it, Blender was developed in parallel to giants like Side Effects with their Houdini, Autodesk with Maya, 3D Max, Cinema 4D. They all started in 90s, sooner or later. While we know the stories of those softwares, Blender was always like a toy for an industry, nothing serious. It wasn't considered serious. But in recent years, we see more and more top players adapting Blender, using it for various tasks, for various productions. And it's not a joke anymore. And Blender is finally treated seriously, even in big studios. They seriously consider on switching to Blender, or some of them, a lot of them actually in Europe especially, switched to Blender. We ourselves just delivered, well, not just, for the past 2 years we were delivering massive projects, the projects that last year plus. And majority of the stuff there was modeled and animated in Blender. It proven itself a very versatile and capable tool. I myself recently switched to Blender for the basic modeling, and I plan to try out rigging and animation in there as well. Anyway, my point is, the person in this interview, Ton Roosendaal, just think about it. What kind of person you have to be to convert people into your idea, to inspire them, to spark something in them, to, motivate them to follow your cause. It's crazy. Ton Roosendaal was doing it for 30 years. This year, 2024, Blender turns 30, and it's treated seriously. Enjoy. I'm here with the legend, Ton Roosendaal, at Blender Conference 2024. Ton, thank you for your time.
Yes, welcome.
Ton, you've been a founder of a company called Neo Geo, where Blender was inspired, started and stuff. Was it inspired by some challenge, project, specific case, or a need in something?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you remember the first time you saw computers making a picture or making 3D, that's when I saw in the mid-80s, I was mesmerized. So the fact that you can use a computer to design a 3D thing or even a 3D world, that's like magic.
Yeah.
That magic is something that really was driving me. So when we started the first company, the Neo Geo, with a business partner, the goal was simply to raise money, we borrowed money and get some clients, so that we could buy computers that could make 3D,
right,
could make computer graphics. Because I wanted to understand how it works, not only to use it as a maker, but how does it work? So we also therefore had to learn programming and do little tools for yourself to create computer graphics.
Ton is a self-taught developer.
So basically we started Neo Geo because we didn't have the money because one 3D computer would cost like the equivalent now of $60,000.
Oh my God.
100,000. And you had an 8 megabyte computer with a 24-bit graphics card.
Yeah.
So you could buy almost a house in those days, right, for this. And the silicon graphics computers, they were called, and there are some others. Only people in Hollywood had them. And if you would buy a silicon graphics, it was like buying a car in a fancy, expensive car salesman people. So anyway, so because of the fact that we needed the money to buy the equipment, we started the company. And then we started making tools. And it was all based on, I want to have it. And I want to understand it. And I want to make things with it. Like, how does it work? How can you get the computer to draw 3D? How? What is behind it?
So you're curious.
And that was in the 80s. For the first time, we had computer graphics, and you had ray tracing, and you had rendering. And then you saw computer magazines with computer graphics pictures in it. The stuff is mesmerizing, as if you would become a magician, right? And that's for a lot of people who are into computer graphics or in 3D, they still have that feeling like that they are playing with some kind of magic.
Yeah, it is.
And this motivation is what I always come back to when I talk to people about Blender. So what is it? Right? Like, remember your 12-year self, right? When you were young and you were thinking about what do you want to do, and that feeling of magic and power, or the fact that you can create a whole universe in the computer, and you are the creator and you can do anything you want with it.
It still sparks me today.
That's the thing that we always should come back to. That's, so Blender is because of that, simply because of my passion for the medium.
Is it still true and on the same level inspires you? Yeah.
And I think that's what people recognize. And that's why people like Blender. And even when they don't use Blender, it doesn't matter. When I talk to people from the industry, they recognize the passion and the interest and the feeling of, yes, when we were young, we saw this, and this is just the best thing you can do with your time, is to develop things or make things in 3D.
Yeah.
And this is still true now. After 30 years, 3D is still magic.
In my eyes, you guys are like rebellion in Star Wars, you know, against the industry, the corporate and the big. There's only one company apart from Blender in the world who inspires me the same way, and then that's Blackmagic.
Okay, they're good.
They're doing the same. They're democratizing amazing tools for the world, because it's all about art in the first place. Inspires me a lot. So I'm not going to talk about Blender's roadmap. It's publicly available. You guys always announce your plans of development. But in the next 5 to 10 years, are there any fictional features that you personally would like to see in Blender?
Well, we have a roadmap presentation at the conference this afternoon. You should go there. There will be some interesting surprises. But I'll be mapping out globally some things. And apart from, of course, the obvious AI. Everybody wants to do AI. It's a hype. It will go down a bit and it will stabilize somewhere.
Yeah.
And we have to make sure that Blender plays a role in democratizing and keeping it accessible and ethical. Yeah. So that we don't have the billionaires and the big corporations running away with it, but that we make something that we, as artists, can have in control, and that we can define how to use it. And that you don't get like what happens currently, that you almost have nothing to say. It's just you got like an iron curtain with a little hole and you can peep through and press some buttons, but you have no idea what happens on the other side.
Right.
And that's our philosophy, is to make sure that we always have this technology ourselves. What the Blender should do in the coming 5 to 10 years, I think, is embracing the internet.
Internet.
That means collaboration and versioning, revision, storage. I mean, there are so many things that are good at the internet, and not social media. I'm not talking about that part. But the internet is technology. And even though it can be abused, it's like every technology, some use it to control users and then they can get more money out of it. But with Blender, even though our principle is that it should run without internet, we have to look at extending the functionality with good online storage and collaboration. You should be able to make something in Blender and share it in one button, right? Button press.
Okay.
So you make something, right? In Blender, you can make anything. You can do from video editing to node systems and interactive systems. You want to make more interaction editing again. So you could make a building and then you add a camera with a walkthrough option so you can view the building. And you should be able to send that to another person, or your client or the world, to say, well, I want to have this interactive experience online for people to enjoy. Yeah. Right? I think that will be one of the things that creators would want. Because if you can see it on your own computer, you should be able to share that. And so saving it out as frames and rendering and editing or as a game engine and publishing it, all those steps are way too complicated. This should all be integrated. Yeah. Not like Google Docs, right? You use Google Docs.
Of course, everyone does.
Google Docs is just the simplicity.
On a phone and computer, it just works.
It's everywhere. Yeah. So why don't we do that for 3D and for computer graphics?
That's interesting. So is it safe to say that your ultimate goal is still to have a one-stop production solution for anything in the world?
One for everything, no, but for computer graphics and 3D.
Computer graphics and 3D, yeah. Which is everything.
Okay, you could call that everything, but there are more things in the world. But anyway, but for us, the focus is give artists the freedom to make things, get the technology that is happening out there in the hands of people as open source software. Very simple principle. That means that we're always sometimes behind, we're lacking a little bit, sometimes we can innovate, but the focus is always on make sure that people have the freedom to do things, period. And so we don't want to take over the world.
It's clear that your guys are not about profits and stuff. You've been quite transparent on your presentation. Finances were a focus of Ton's presentation this year at Blender conference. Speaking of fun, you guys do a lot of open movie projects. What is it? Is it a playground? Is it a test polygon for you, or is it just passion?
Everything, of course.
Everything.
Yeah. I'm a maker, right? I like to make things. My passion for 3D is not abstract or so, like, oh wow, I would like to know how this works and how to do this. I want to use it to make things with it. Because then you can make things. I'm a maker. So making a film, in my Neo Geo, we were making things, we were making content, we didn't make software.
What is your involvement? Are you directing or?
In the 90s, in Neo Geo, I was the account manager and the creative director and the programmer.
No, in open movies.
And now in open movies, the first one we started in 2005.
Yeah.
And the reason was that then the open source projects were running, and I thought, okay, it's getting there, but we are also becoming like a real open source project. And you get the typical developer culture online. Don't know if you know software developers. They are not everyone, but they are typical people, usually guys with some guy humor and stuff. But they, especially in some open source circles, users are not your friends. Users are the annoying things that you got if you finish your software.
Right.
The computer engineers can be very focused on their technology, on their software, and on making things work for them. And so you get a very tech bro culture that is not very inclusive for creative people. And because I come from a studio background where we had creative people and technical people together, I thought I want to have that back. Similar to like how Pixar is doing things. They combine the creatives, the best creatives with the best technical people and let them work together. So that's when I thought, let's do short films and invite the best artists in the community to come to Amsterdam, work together and connect them with developers and do everything in the open so that developers also understand why is something important. Because technology is only interesting when it gets used. Right? And that combination, that is how open movies worked for us. So we always had targets of, okay, we want to have a haircut. There's a character, he needs hair. And then the designer said, I want to have him not with long curly hair, whatever, and he starts waving. No, it's not possible, it's way too complicated. Okay, then we make a short haircut. Can we do that? Without wavy hair. Okay, we can get that done, right? That was the first open movie. And they wanted to have better floating point colors, and they wanted to have compositing, right? All those things that Blender needed in order to make a short film that looks a little bit like how the market is making films in those days. And this worked fantastic, not only as a development model, had a focus, to get focus on making things, but also to get funding. Because we're talking about 2005, 6, 7, donating for open source, it was not a big thing, right? People did pay for making Blender open source, that was in 2002, but we didn't get a lot of donations in, but people do like to pay for a product. So what we made for like 10 years almost, the main income was selling plastic DVDs with our open movies, which also had all the data on it and the software. So every frame was there from the film, every blend file was there, texture, model, and tutorials. So you got a movie, plus the whole making of with all the data and everything.
That's
and the software
interesting.
there to do this. So we sold tens of thousands of DVDs for the open movies. And this is how we could get our first offices and hire one or two developers who could do things, and then we could start growing.
That's really curious.
So people like to pay for content better than they like to pay for software.
Yeah.
It's still, right? People don't mind going to...
Yeah, it's curious.
You buy a book, all right, or you pay something for music.
Are you working on any open movie right now?
Well, but this thing is shifting a little bit. Because but the other thing that we did was pushing the limits of Blender and making things that nobody was doing.
Yeah.
Right? We were always like, the old movies, especially the first 5 to 8 years, showed the best of the best of the best that we could do on Blender. But currently, in the past 5 years, Blender is being used by so many professionals, so many big talents. What you see, what's being done with Blender is just amazing.
Since 2.8, the growth was so
you don't
rapid.
see a difference anymore. You see something in 3D now on the web. It's like, could be done with Blender or with Houdini or with Maya or with Cinema 4D.
Yeah.
There's no difference, right? You really have to ask people, what did you use? I use a mix, or I use some Blender, I use some this or that, or I use Eevee, or I use Cycles. You have to ask people what they are using. So Blender is good enough, we know that. But not only the software become better, we also got better users.
Yeah.
And that was my goal after 2.8, was to get a better user base. Because we have to, of course I love amateurs and I love people who use Blender as a hobby. But in order to grow and to give also the amateurs and the hobbyists the best 3D software ever, you also have to get better users to help you designing all the tools and things.
That's funny. Even on my channel, I think I was doing a video about ACES, and I said that at the time Cinema 4D or others were not supporting ACES, but Blender on the other hand had Filmic Blender that mimics all the functionality of ACES. And people in comments are my favorite section. Like Blender will never become like a real boy, blah 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 blah, blah 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 blah. But since 2.8, the growth was so rapid, so it's not even a question. It's a tool of an industry.
It was exponential. It was for us from the inside. It was very steady, the growth. But from the outside point of view, it sometimes feels like, but 2.8 was like as if the water separated and everybody...
What happened? What changed in your approach with 2.8?
Nothing. It was just little, for me, it was little steps.
Okay.
Because the whole concept of what we wanted to do for 2.8, I already wrote that 4 or 5 years before. I had a presentation.
Well, was it
for the roadmap? I said we have to tackle all those things in order to do something.
Was it technologies or
people? It takes 5 years to get there. 4 or 5 years to get to that level. So it's not like, we made the default from right-click select to left-click select.
So it's just work, just time that was necessary.
You already could select with left-click in Blender for like 10 years. That was already there. It was not the default. Changing a default is a little thing. But that was not the thing that made everybody start using Blender. And 2.8 was a massive recode of a lot of core technology behind Blender. Especially, we called it the workflow release. Everything was related to workflow. To make people work faster, more efficient, get them better control over how the UI works, put Python everywhere. The whole UI in Blender is being built up by Python. That means that's why the add-ons took off so well. With an add-on and with a Python script, you can create your own tool. And you can make your own functionality. So you can customize Blender in the way that you want to have it work. Because there is no one way where everybody will be happy with. VFX artists have a different workflows than animators.
Yeah, definitely.
And the character animator would like to have a couple of shortcuts very easily accessible with a toolbar or something, and then a big viewport where they look at the characters.
Right.
And the VFX artist doesn't want to have all those shortcuts. They want to have different things for their layouts and defaults.
Yeah.
So this is the design of Blender 2.8, is to make it a workflow-friendly tool. And that's the reason I think that a lot of studios and professionals thought, okay, now I'm going to test it and try it.
That makes sense.
From the outside, it was like, they added a toolbar and they changed the default. Now I can use it. It's not true, right? It was much more. That's why people, when they found out that they could use it, that it was actually well done and good integrated and not like a gimmick, but this was a tool that...
Dmitro, the third guy that's with us, he started his career he's a professional musician. He was a music teacher. He wanted to do his visuals himself, and obviously the Blender was opened for him to experiment with, and he started from version 2.8, and now he's a really professional 3D artist that I respect. He's my right hand. Thanks to Blender. Everything, so half of our work we do in our studio is with Blender.
He started making music videos or
he was directing his shows with light, and when they recorded that, and he wanted to enhance it. So that's how he got into 3D, and Blender is his tool till this date, and I encourage not to switch to, Houdini or whatever. Just keep mastering Blender. So we're using Blender a lot in our studio. I personally just assembled the shots in Houdini.
But Blender can be used for, like Houdini, for procedural things. So you can have some input, whatever it is, music or your keyboard or a MIDI interface.
Yeah.
And then generate things based on node systems. So without any programming, people can now make tools in Blender, or they can create procedural environment.
Yes.
You could make a tool with nodes that creates buildings or that creates environments or landscapes. And that kind of development, I think, is important to counterweigh the AI revolution. Because with AI, you type text and then you hope something interesting comes out of it. But as an artist, you want to work with your hands. And if you have a brush to paint trees, right, with strokes, and then you create tools to make the trees a little bit different or not, then you as an artist, you feel in control again. And that the fact that you don't have to draw every leaf and branch and stuff is not a problem, because you can think on a bigger scale. Because if you want to make a forest, you need thousands of trees.
Yeah.
You're not going to model every branch and every leaf by hand. So if you have tools that make you the trees, and you can move them around a little bit and scale them a little bit, you're working with your hands again.
Yeah.
And that's the stuff that we are working on in Blender.
Yeah, you partially answered all the remaining questions I had. But I mean, AI, I absolutely understand your point, and Blender's take on AI. Still, do you think you will be integrating it more in the tools? So for specific tools in Blender?
You should always look at tools.
Yeah.
Tools is what people are tool makers. I think civilization started with tools, right? The first monkey with a stick, and then trying to make a little hatchet thing.
Yeah.
People are tool makers.
Yes.
If you look at the whole history of what civilization started, it's tools. So tools for artists to make computer graphics will always be a good thing to do.
Yes.
And if there's an AI component in the tools, that's fine. But that means that you have little assistants to work with.
Assistant, exactly.
Yeah, assistants. You can say, well, hey, unwrap this thing, and I want to have a marble on it.
Yeah.
Right? You could almost talk to the computer, or you type it, or whatever. But those things are probably going to happen. So usually, 30 years ago, to put marble on something, that was like a lot of work.
Yeah,
the fact that
with
you
the
have this faster is not a problem, right? We also remember the time that you had to draw perspective with all kinds of tricks with lines on paper and rulers, and And then you had a perspective drawing of a building.
Yeah.
And now a computer can do it like in a second. And did that make the people who make drawings out of their jobs? Of course not. Right? And you still have people who draw perspective. And those are beautiful drawings. I really like this.
And still valued a lot.
It's valued, it's fun to see, and it's great to do. But a computer can do it faster. And those things can live next to each other.
Yeah. That's a really good take. I like it. I like that perspective.
Yeah. The same is for VFX, right? The fact that you can now have a robot walking around in the back or something with some AI tools without too much work. It's fine, right? There's nothing. You can say, yeah, but it makes all the VFX artists unemployed. No, because I don't think all the VFX artists like to work on background characters all the time and do things that nobody really notices because the director likes it. Right? Yeah. As a VFX artist, you want to make art, right? You want to be a little bit in control over what you are making.
Of course.
And you want to have a creative, you want to express your creativity. So
that's cool.
That will be fine.
I'm currently collaborating with Otoy.
Yeah.
And I recently was involved a lot with Render Network team. Render Network is currently in a closed beta for native Blender support. Not only with Octane, but with cycles. I just want to hear...
Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah. Nice.
Yes, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on Render Network and Blender.
Last time when I talked to Gilles, the CEO of Otoy, he expressed his great positivism about the Blender community within the Otoy community. Right. Blender is big. A lot of people are using Blender and Octane together. And he really likes that. And for that reason, he said, we as a Blender user, you get it for free. And if you are a Cinema 4D user or something else, you have to pay for it, right? Is that still true?
Yeah.
Okay, good. But he said, our business then will be, we give the software for free, so no problem that everybody can use it, but we will connect it with a render service. And that's what, in the end, professionals or people who want to make things, they need fast. And you want in 1 hour, you want your product to be done. And that's where he expects the business will be. And that's, for me, that's perfect. That's a really good, well aligned with the free software philosophy. Because you don't sell the software, you sell the service. And with the service that people want and that they find helpful, for example, rendering. So I'm very happy to hear that.
Render Network got bigger, new tools. Like it used to be clunky. You needed to bake, you needed to upload and download through web browser. Now there are managers. It's done in several clicks. It's much quicker. For me, Blender's native support, you don't need to worry about anything. You just upload your blend file, and it works.
Yeah, you throw a blend file on the web.
Blend file, either with cycles.
The start frame, end frame,
and
settings.
Yeah.
And it makes sure.
It
will be demonstrated tomorrow, I think, in the market.
On Friday, yeah. By the way, Octane team asked me to present you with this, with a
pin
with the Render Network.
I can remember. I can see a little bit of the Star Trek.
The resemblance,
Star Trek resemblance.
Yes, sir.
It's almost a thing that you can press a button and then it will do something. Thank you. But you are familiar with a lot of professional users in the industry.
Yes.
So you also have an outside point of view. So one of the challenges we have with the Blender Foundation is to find a way to get the movie industry to move.
Right.
Because everybody who's working for the studios and the movie industry, they like Blender and they would like to adapt it. But on the top, a little bit more on the board levels and on the legal levels, there is a resistance. And I noticed that this is caused for a large part because of misconceptions on the Blender license. It was my keynote last year about the ZPL to explain them that this license is not infectious, it's not dangerous, we are not going to sue people, it is not anything that you have to worry about. It's similar to any commercial license. If you're not afraid to use Autodesk software, then you should not be afraid to use Blender, right? It's just a license, it has some pluses and minuses, and that's what you should accept. But in the film industry, sometimes also the games industry, people think that by using Blender, your own IP is a danger. Did you ever hear that kind of story?
Haven't heard of it, but it does make sense why that misconception may occur, because it's open source. Companies' heads are usually rigid in perceiving new or unusual. They need working solutions. That's why it was part of your presentation last year about plugin-based Blender and how often it is requested. Given the story of Blender and your story with Blender, how it was developed, I totally understand your point. I mean, corporate world is difficult to fight. So we need to either adopt, which we're doing, and maybe in your case, advise to companies how to best utilize Blender. I think what you're doing with open movies, that's why I asked. It's the best way. It's the best way to invite community. It's the best way to prove to the world what Blender is capable of. It's the best way to show the technical people behind studios how it's built.
And to test it and to validate the ideas behind it.
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
make it stable, right?
Blender is innovation. I mean, interactive viewport cycles, live rendering.
Exponential.
Yes, motion blur. A couple of years ago, I was testing new NVIDIA 3090s when they came out, and Blender just came up with ray traced motion blur.
In cycles?
Yes, in cycles. It was instant, and it wasn't available anywhere else. I mean, Blender is innovation. Innovation is scary for big and corporate. That's my answer.
So good. I think it's a good positive force that there is innovation happening in an open source organization. But a lot of commercial software, they look at Blender now, right? For example, last week, Photoshop, Adobe, they released Photoshop turntable.
Yeah.
And we're looking at it, it's pretty special. Blender is already doing this for like 10 years or longer. And they finally catching up with it.
Yeah, that's funny.
Same thing happened in Maya. They also added their pencil tools to do this. So, but that's good. I like this. I like this kind of. You can with a lot of good ideas from others.
You can see the trends in the industry. You can see what other companies are doing. I'm not gonna name names, but you know. The changing pricing.
I'm always on good speaking terms with people from Autodesk or the bosses, with the CEO of Side Effects. I mean, when I meet them, we exchange some friendly words. And what I hear is that they say, what we like about Blender especially is because we have such a fast throughput that it's like a test bed, right? So you add features and we can monitor in public if things work or not, right?
Yeah.
Some things work really well and sometimes it doesn't work. And that's for them, a way to test their ideas and wait for Blender to do this. And if it works, then they do it too. If it doesn't work, they don't do it. So Blender's in there, we are leading a little bit the way in some areas, which is really fun.
Ton, something you mentioned yesterday. Obviously, Ton is a legend. He lived a legendary life, had legendary adventures in business and development. You keep mentioning that you want to retire soon. Does it mean that Blender team and Blender Foundation is at its, strongest peak force, and you are surrounded by people who you can entrust Blender's future and not be worried about it?
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about that, about the future.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's really good for an organization to have a natural growth. Where I presented the volcano model in my talk.
Yeah.
It's not a pyramid where you have the people on the top defining what's happening at the bottom.
Yeah.
At Blender, we have a community. So we should make sure that we keep having people coming in from the bottom, that the talents, that they can bubble up and they become top contributors. And we should allow our top contributors also to spread around and work elsewhere. And I also see myself as something that the volcano can spit out and I can land somewhere. Maybe I'll go back coding, or I don't know what I'm going to do.
Okay.
But if I'm doing something for so long, I was 30 years, you also lose a little bit of your flexibility. You become rigid in some areas. It's important to have young people try their stuff, right? And Blender can only survive if I make myself obsolete.
Yeah.
And I also see it as a way to get my freedom back. Because 10 years ago, I decided not to do coding anymore, but to spend all my time building an organization, make sure that we have the funding and that we have a strong organization to support the Blender project, which is also something that will buy my own freedom. Because when we have such an organization, then I have other people to do all the shit, and then they will organize the conferences, and they will do all the bug fixing and the communication.
And you will attend for fun.
And the funding, and talking to the sponsors and the donators and all that kind of things. And then I can do things that I like. Maybe I'm going to work with a little group on some innovative web technology or testing. Can you make a 3D tool in a browser? How does that work with Blender? Or, there are always so many ideas that you can explore.
That's really good.
You can become a maker again and not the CEO.
Yeah.
But that's a full-time job. And,
so you do want to come back being hands-on?
Of course, I always want to. I'm unstoppable.
Okay.
I'm unstoppable. I
That's,
don't know what it, but I need time to think about that.
That's really inspirational that you still want to do that.
Of course. Yeah. So I still have a lot of energy, but I first have to make sure that I take enough distance to make sure that the new team can feel supported and empowered to do things. And I will be there in the supervisory board, right? I will make sure that the continuity is good. So it will stay open source, it will be free software. Nice. It will not be coming a weird commercial thing suddenly. No way that I will fund and found the structure of the company and the organization in a way that the continuity is guaranteed. But for all the day-to-day stuff, I don't have to be involved with that. Other people can do that. And Blender is like a big organization now, and it's a big tool.
Yeah,
it's very difficult to make it go left or right. So it has a steady course. And
people are like-minded, which is important. They aligned on one mission. That's so cool. Ton, you have my eternal respect.
Thank you. That's nice.
Thank you for existing, sir. Yeah.